Hello, good evening, and welcome back. So it seems that in Blackburn, the health warnings in Urdu and Gujarati weren't quite enough, as lo and behold, Blackburn Mosque faces police investigation over 250 people at a funeral. Should this be a problem in the first place? No, of course it shouldn't. But if you've got all the white guilt and the authoritarian tendencies to boot, then you're going to pay particular attention to the ethnic minorities, those poor Middle Eastern, Southern Asian communities within England, because they can't be trusted to take care of their own, the soft bigotry of low expectations, and therefore, of course, you have to probe into it and have to see, because don't you know it's for their own good. So as they see here, that leaders at a mosque in Blackburn, at the Jamia Garcia Mosque, say they are being investigated by police and health officials after around 250 people attended a funeral service. The chairman of Jamia Garcia Mosque said they thought there were no restrictions on numbers if hygiene and distancing measures were in place. And that is an interesting point, that if you get tested for COVID-19 and it's negative, and you go to a group meeting and everybody else has been tested and is negative, does that then mean that it's okay and you can interact? Well, no. As we saw with Nigel Farage coming back from the US and saying, well, I've been tested and it's negative, the response is, well, they're not correct 100% of the time. You might have got a false negative, in which case you do actually have it, and now you're spreading it around to other people and you're not quarantining. So no matter if the result is positive or negative, you still have to abide by the rules. So the same thing goes here, that even if your hygiene and distancing measures are in place, it's still a no. The rules set out by the law, if you don't know by now, you really should, are predominantly arbitrary. There are a few core commandments, basically in line with the non-aggression principle championed by Stefan Molyneux, and things other than that are essentially arbitrary. It's there to make some people feel good and, unfortunately, make everybody else's lives difficult. They're good in principle, but this is where it's different between the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. That in the spirit of the law, the idea is to keep people safe and free and happy. That's the idea. But in the letter of the law, none of those apply. And when it comes down to it, of course, the police or the enforcers only know what they've been told, and the letter of the law is what the letter of the law is, and therefore, you're in trouble. On top of that, the Mosque Committee said the Imam had since tested positive for COVID-19 and is recovering from the virus. Which is just the cherry on top. It's the ketchup to their bacon sandwich. Since 4th of July, a maximum of 30 people have been allowed at funerals. In an email to worshippers seen by the BBC, it said around 250 participants attended the funeral prayer on 13th of July. It said furthermore, the mosque is under investigation by the police and the public health for exceeding the number of people allowed to participate in a funeral, which is 30, and for failing to comply with the law. There is a possibility that other attendees may also have been infected at the Janazah prayers. On top of that, of course, as they say, it said future funeral prayers would be limited to 30 people, and the same goes for the services. It is the group meetings that are the problem. And, of course, as I've mentioned before, that they did have their notices out in English, Urdu, and Gujarati, and yet it doesn't seem to have quite done the trick. That I think that maybe there is perhaps a slight difference here, but for the most part, if you have a different culture, going after a different god or a different belief in the type of god, it's Yahweh, but the three Abrahamic religions view him differently, then they're going to view that as the overarching law. That is the thing which they must comply to. And if there is a conflict between their religion, the one that is responsible for everything in their life and the afterlife, compared to what the authorities say in the nation they're currently residing in, then of course they're going to pick their deity instead. That's where the idea of martyrs come from, of course. People will happily die for their beliefs because they believe that there is something better for them on the other side if they do this, and worse if they don't. So it is fully understandable that that happens, and the only way to really counter that is to either explain how Muhammad was a false prophet, and you could look at David Wood, the Acts 17 apologetics, for more information on that if you're so inclined. Or, in terms of Reformation, to say, well, yes, if you want to be a mosque over here and you want to be that imam, then you have to abide by English common law and our Enlightenment values, the Judeo-Christian values, if you will, that you do have to abide by. That you can have your different ways of living when it comes to yourself and your family, and we don't care. But if it's spreading out into the further community, then that is where we put our foot down and say, no, you can't do it. Just like in kosher or halal slaughter, saying, no, that's now affecting other people and other things. We're not okay with this, so you can't do it. Very, very straightforward. And you just have that the whole way across any possible religion. You have your right to practice your religion as much as you see fit, but when it comes down to violating the non-aggression principle for other people and going against the laws that we have, which we agree with, then you can't do it. So of course they say, strike the non-believers at the neck where you find them. That violates the non-aggression principle, and that also violates the laws of England, in which case you can't do it. Very straightforward. Just like when it comes to killing animals for food, you have to stun them before you kill them. And if the halal or kosher slaughter don't want to abide by it, then they can't be done. Very, very straightforward. So, Blackburn with Darwin, which is one of the highest infection rates on England, brought in extra restrictions on Tuesday, as covered here. The Lancashire borough has seen a rise in coronavirus cases centred on terraced houses with a high number of occupants. I'm going to give you one guess. Most new cases were among the South Asian community, public health officials said. I bet you got it. I bet you did. For the next month, the area's 148,000 residents have been told to observe the new rules in a bid to avoid a Leicester-style lockdown. So, it is funny. It is tragically humorous that you have, of course, a different culture making it difficult for the locals. And then, as in the indigenous folk, if you will, the people who have been enjoying their life there and not causing a problem at all. And then you've got new rules made by the ruling elite in London that now affects the indigenous folk so far away from them because of the different people that have now come into their society. And it just gets better and better and better. Like, is this some four-dimensional chess that we're trying to do here to say, actually these cultural practices aren't okay and we're going to try and shine a light on them a great deal by saying that, yeah, you can have different generations living in the same home, but if you're basing it on benefits and you come here to just take the money, then it's not okay. And if you have problems with hygiene, as most of these cultures do, shitting in the streets is just one example, and there were several jokes of saying, oh, I have a deodorant can in my car in case I'm attacked by the Middle Easterners, the Pakistanis, and saying, well, the police say, well, you can't spray that in their face, that's assault with a weapon. And I was like, well, no, I'm not going to spray it at them. Just, if I give it to them, they're going to be so confused by what it is, I'm going to have enough time to escape. And stereotypes are there for a reason. And if you do have this poor hygiene, that you can smell it as soon as the front door opens, then of course you're going to have these issues. If hygiene and health and well-being aren't values within those communities and those cultures, then of course they're going to have health problems, and this is just another example of them. So I sympathise with everybody else in Blackburn and Darwin who aren't part of these barbaric, backward, archaic rituals and cultural richness. But unfortunately, until you get things sorted and maybe elect a mayor that wants to sort out the problem, this is the mess you found yourself in. So perhaps start doing something about it if you don't want it to continue. It's not all your fault, but you are partly to blame as well. Sorry to say. Nobody is without sin. But until next time, as always, have a good one.